Okay, welcome all of you. Today what we'll see is functions, recursions and some introduction to lists. So lists are basically arrays in Python. So before we begin some theoretical portion, let me again tell you that all this, whatever we will cover today, is not an essential part of your syllabus. But still, I'm taking this portion, because you may feel that while solving any question, or let's say while writing any program, you may feel that using recursion or using the arrays may solve your problem in an easier fashion. So just to give you the knowledge about all these things, we are taking today's lecture. Don't take it as, or you may say that you won't be asked any direct questions on, functions, recursion, and arrays. So you don't have to bother too much about even if you don't go into much of the depth. So let me share the today's document. I hope this is visible to everyone. The first topic is lists. Okay, so lists are nothing but the arrays in the Python. Arrays, as you all of you know, it is just a contiguous sequence of items. Okay, so in contrast to that, lists are basically something which is not stored contiguous. Okay, in the lists, your data type does not matter. That means it doesn't have to be uniform. There should not be any homogeneity in the data items in the list. So you can firstly see sequence of values can be stored as, let's say, if factors is a list, in the factors and what I'm storing is some five values separated by commas and embedded in the square brackets. Okay. So if I write 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 in the list factors, so this sequence is ready with me and I can call this list as the name suggests factors. Similarly, I can also store, let's say, some strings. Okay, so here, if you observe in the names list, I have stored three names separated by commas and embedded in the square brackets. Now, in this list, you basically don't have to bother about what the data type of your items is, unlike in the arrays in the C, where I have told you that the data type of each and every item has to be same. Okay. Whereas here it is not that mandatory. You can store, let's say, ints, you can store characters, you can store strings in one list without bothering about what is the current data type of your list. So this two typical list we will consider as our examples, and I will show you how to operate on them and what are the various operations that you can perform. So if you observe, factors is the list, okay, and the items, the first item can be known as factor 0. Okay. This is factor 1, this is factor 2, this is factor 3, and this is factor 4. Total 5 items are there. So if I mention or if I refer to factors in the brackets 3, that means the third location starting with an index 0. So if you observe in this list factors, the factors 3 will be 40. The position number 3, if you start from 0, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3. Factors of 3 will be 40. It is also possible to extract the sublist, or let's call as a subset of your main set or the main list in this fashion. If I write factors 0 colon 3, so what it will give me in return is, if you start from 0, so the zeroth element, the first element, the second element, okay, and not the third element, because the upper limit is of course not included anywhere in the Python. So factor 0 colon 3 will give me back 10, 20, and 30. Okay. If I write 4 over here, it will give me back 10, 20, 30, and 40. So, and let's say for this info, if I write 0 colon 2, what it will give me back is the 0th position element and the first position element, which is Rahul and 20 over here. If I write 3, so what it will give me back is 0th position element, the first position element, and the second position element. Then if I want to know what is the length of my list, let's say factors, here the length is 5. If I want to know from the function, I can use len function, pass the list inside as a parameter. So this len factors will return back 5. that can also be stored in a name by writing at the LHS, let's say L equal to alien factors. L will have the value 5. If I want to iterate over my list, I can use a for loop by writing for I in the range, and in the range function I can mention the lower limit as 0 and the upper limit as whatever is the length of the list. Okay. If you do not know beforehand what is the length of your list, you can just put a function over here as len inside whatever the list that you want to mention. Then the next is the is operator. Okay. This is equivalent to your double equal to comparison operator. If I write something like list 1 is list 2, so what is will do is it will compare the list 1 and list 2. If they are found to be of having same values, it will return me back true, otherwise it will return false. So if I write, let's say something like this, L equal to list 1 is list 2, and let's say if the items in the list 1 is same as the items in the list 2, I will get the value as true. Okay, true and false is basically the bool type values, or you can assume it to be just 1 and 0. The next operation is the concatenation of the list. Okay, so suppose list 1 is having some elements and the list 2 is having some elements. If I concatenate them by using the plus operator, plus is basically concatenation operator when you mention lists as their operators. So if I write something like list 3 equal to list 1 plus list 2, the list 3 will be the newly created list having all the items from list 1 to list 2. Okay. So the first items will be the items from the list 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and that will be followed by whatever are the elements in the list 2, just 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So this plus what it will do is the concatenation operation. This concatenation will always produce a new list. Suppose if I'm having a list 1 as 1, 3, 5, 7, okay, if I copy this list 1 to list 2, and then if I do list 1 equal to list 1 plus I am appending the item 9. So whatever the contents of list 1 were there will stay back, and the next element will be appended after this 7. So the new list 1, because I have appended 9, that will be modified to 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So now this 9 is basically concatenated or appended at the end of the list 1. Whereas just because I had copied list 1 to list 2 will remain same as it is with elements 1, 3 and 1, 3, 5 and 7. We'll first cover all the theoretical part, and at the end I will give you this. I'll give you some time if there are any doubts to handle. So this is all about the basic operations that you are supposed to know about the list. So if someone is having any doubt or if something is unclear to you, you can please ask. Remember that I am not telling you how to scan the elements and store it in the arrays, because that is not an essential part to be known at this stage. You may require just the list just to store back your values in the program, inside the program. So this was all about list. I hope everything is clear over here. The next thing that we will see is this discussion of mutable versus immutable values. We will see the programs at the end once the complete theory is covered. So suppose if I write down statements such as x equal to 5, 5 is assigned to x, then I copy the value of x into y, and then I modify x equal to 7. So my question to you is, does the value of y change to 7? This question is just independent of the language. X is equal to 5, that means the data type of x is now 7, is now int. If I copy the value x to y and then make the change as x equal to 7, my question is, does the value of y also changes to 7? It is of course no. It is but obvious thing. But why it is not been changed to 7 is, the reason is when you assign or when you use the assignment operator, what gets copied is the fresh copy of the value, and therefore change on one variable will not reflect on the change on the another variable. That is why such values are called as immutable values. The examples are int, float, and the boolean. But if you talk about lists, which are typically known as mutable values, the reason is, let's say if I have a list 1 with an items 1, 3, 5, 7, if I copy list 1 to list 2 with an assignment, now list 2 will also have 1, 3, 5, 7. This doesn't mean that the list 1 is copied to list 2. What it means is whatever is the set of the values in the list 1, that can also now be identified by the name list 2. Okay, so you can assume something like that this list 1 is basically pointing to this set of values. Okay, and list 2, because of this statement, is also pointing to the set of values which are of the same values 1, 3, 5, and 7. Okay. And if I make any change in, let's say, list 1, 2 equal to 4, now my question is whether the change will reflect in list 2. Let's say list 1 is 1357, and as I said, list 1 is assigned to list 2, and if I make some change, let's say in the list 1, let's say if I write list 2 equal to 4, that means if I modify 0, 1 to this element, the value 5 with 4, will the change reflect back on list 2? Yes, it will reflect back. Let me show you this practically. Okay, so let's say if f list is the thing, or okay, let's do it freshly. List 1 is the first list which is having elements 1, 3, 5, 7. Then if I write or if I assign list 2 to list 1, meaning that the list the list 1 will also be identified by the name list 2. And if I make any change, let's say in the list 1 of 2 as 4, and if I try to get what is list 1, the change has been reflected. So 5 was replaced by 4 in the list 1. So our question was whether list 2 has also been affected. So the answer is yes, because the list is of the type of the mutable values. Whatever the change you make by using one name will also reflect back in the another. So let's see list 2. So if you observe list 2, the change was also reflected in the list. So this is the difference between the immutable values and the mutable values. In the immutable values, where I had written x equal to 5, y equal to x, and then I changed x equal to 7 like this. So the change was not reflected in the y. Okay, so such type of values, typically int or float values, are of the type immutable. Okay, and whereas the lists are of the type mutable. Whatever the change you make in one name will also reflect back for the second name as well. So that, and why this happens basically is because when I have written list 2 equal to list 1, the values of list 1 was not copied to list 2. What this means in case of list is this set of values can be identified by the name list 1 as well as list 2 after I have written list 2 equal to list 1. So this is what it means. This does not mean, I am again repeating, list 2 equal to list 1 does not mean that the elements of list 1 are now copied to list 2. What it means is this set of elements which was identified by the name list 1 will now also be identified by list 2. Okay. And whatever the change that you make with any of the name will actually reflect back on the original set of values. And now why this discussion is basically important is because the next we will see how to pass the values to your functions. Okay, if you remember in C, I had told you there are basically two types. Okay. When you pass some integer values to your function and make some changes inside the function, that changes are not reflected in the main function, and that procedure was typically called as call by value. Okay, whereas if you pass array to your function and make some changes to your array, those changes are reflected in the main, because the changes which was made in the array was the changes made on the actual values. Okay. Whereas when you pass the int values to your functions, the changes made was on the copy of those elements. So this is where immutable and mutable values are differentiated. One more thing I want to mention over here is, let's say, okay, I'll just but if I want, let's say list 2 is the newly created list, and I want the list 2 differently and list 1 differently. Okay, and I want whatever the elements were there in the list 1 to be reflected, or let's say to be copied onto list 2. What I can do is by writing list 2 equal to list 1 and by mentioning the square brackets and the colon. Okay. So these empty things basically denote that the complete list 1 has to be copied to list 2. And after writing this statement, what will happen is whatever the elements were there in list 1 will be now actually copied to list 2, and whatever the changes you will do on list 1 or list 2 will not reflect back on either list 1 or list 2. So this is all about the mutable and immutable values. Now we will see how functions are handled. So in the functions, if you pass the immutable values from your driver code to your function, immutable values means you pass int values and the float values. And if you try to make some changes inside that function, okay, and try to see whether that change has been reflected on the driver code, so you will fail to do so. So immutable values, when you will pass, what will be passed is basically the copy of the array. So we'll see with this example. So let's say mystery is some function, okay, and I have my driver code. So here if you observe, I have declared one variable as n equal to 7. Then what I did was I called the mystery function with parameter 5. So I passed the value 5. Now since this mystery was called, the control flow will shift to the function mystery. And here I have written something like n equal to 70. And then I return the same value which I accepted, so it will return 5. So you can easily guess that this val will be now 5, because mystery was called with the value 5. This 5 was copied to x, okay, n equal to 17 has been returned, then I returned x, the same value, and that value again came at this place, from the place the function was called, and was copied to your val. So val will definitely be 5. Now my question to you is, does this change on n has reflected on this n equal to 7? Now just think for a minute. We have seen that these integers are basically immutable types. So my question to you is whether manipulating the value of this n has made any effect on this n. Some people are saying no. Okay, so most of the answers are no, and that is right. Okay, so why the change will not reflect is because this n equal to 7 is outside this definition, and this n equal to 7 is basically local to the function mystery. Okay, and even if you write n equal to 7, that change will not be reflected on this n. So every variable that you will use, okay, that will have a local scope for that function. Okay. Now here this driver code is basically not inside any function, so you can consider that the scope of this code is different than the scope of this function. Okay, so this mystery function will keep the copy of its local elements, okay, separately, and this driver code will keep the copy of its local variable separately. And let's say even if you have passed this n over here, okay, and if you make n equal to 17, and let's say if you make x equal to 17 now, okay, So if you have done something like this, let's say n equal to 7, you passed that number 7 to this function, okay, and you made the change to n equal to 17 and passed that same n over here, so that 17 will come at this place and will be assigned to val. Okay, and even after that, if you try to print n, it will still be 7, because this change was not reflected on this n. Okay, the change in this n was not reflected on this n. So you just have to remember that every function will keep the copy of its own local variables, and changing the value of one variable will not reflect the other. That is something called, also called as, what we typically call as the namespace. Okay, so someone was asking me about the namespace. So this is exactly what is the namespace is. Okay, so it is just about the scope of the variable. Okay, even if let's say you do not write n over here, and now if you try to print, or let's say some value is 10, if you try to print n over here, you will basically get an error, because this driver code doesn't know what is n. But you may think, or you may say that n is declared here, okay, but this n is basically local to this mystery function. Okay. So please make note of this thing, that every function will typically keep its own copy of the local variables. Then we will see something about the flow of the functions. So if you observe these two functions, you can clearly distinguish between them. Okay. So let's first observe this code. Okay. In the beginning itself, I have told you that the interpreter will actually start the execution from this point. Okay. But whenever it sees the definition of the function with the keyword def, it just merely digests that there that this function could be invoked from the driver code. Okay. So it basically does not execute this function, but merely digests, or keep the thing in your mind, or take a note of this thing in its mind, that this function could be invoked. Okay, or there exists a function with a name f that might be invoked from the driver code. Then it again sees that there is a second definition to the function called as g. So it also merely digests and remembers that this function g could be invoked from the driver code. Okay, and the actual computation will basically start from this driver code, whereas I have called the function f with an argument 3. Since f is called with an argument 3, 3 is passed to this function, is copied to x, then I have called in the retrieval some another function g. Now just because this interpreter has digested that there exists a g, so it will consult that this g function, and it will calculate whatever is the result, will return back over here, and whatever is the result of retrieval now will return to this point. This is how the execution of the complete program goes. Now if you observe this program, okay, the execution starts from the first line itself. It digests that f is some user defined function. It goes on further, then there is a driver code. Okay, so I have written some code. Since there was a code, it just starts executing and calls the function f. Okay. Now because the execution did not go further, interpreter could not access that there exists a function called as a g. So at this point, when this is executed, when the function f was called, your interpreter does not know what is that there exists a function which is with a name g. Okay. So when I called f, the control goes over here. In the retrieval, I have called g function. At this point, the problem occurs because this was not read. Okay, because of this call, this thing was not read, and at this point, this function g is basically unknown to your interpreter, and it will raise an error. Okay. So the point that you should drive home is that the function must always be defined before it is invoked. It is always essential to write down all the definition first before you write your actual main code at this point. And the order of writing this function f and g does not matter. You could have written this function definition of g prior to f. So this order will not matter. The only thing is that you should have defined it before you use it. So this is about the defining of the functions, and the last thing for the theory part of today is the recursion. I don't think that recalling recursion is of too much importance. Of course, everyone knows what exactly recursion stands for. Okay. And a typical example that we saw for uh, uh, simulating recursion was the recursive factorial function. Okay, if you remember the stack that I used to draw and explain you how the calls are basically made and how the calls return back. Okay, so we'll see how this similar thing is done in the Python. So I have almost around four programs that we'll take up today, and then we will just call it off. So let's go back to our software Thorny. And the first thing that we will try is writing down the recursive factorial function. I hope the screen is visible to everyone. So what I must first do is I will write down the user defined function for calculating the factorial. Okay. So let me call this function as fact helper, which will take some parameter as n, and then I will just write down my definition that if this n is 0, then my retrieval must be 1, else my retrieval will be a recursive call to the same function but with a parameter lesser than the n. And end I will just do return. So this is the fact helper function. This n equal to 0 is the base case, okay, to return back in the subsequent callings, and this else retrieval equal to fact helper is my recursive case where I have passed n minus 1. Okay. I hope all of you know how this executes, and in the driver code I can write, let's say, let's take up some example, some number num, and then I will call my function fact helper, and I will pass this number, and at the end I can just print total is answer. This fact helper is ready. Let's see if this executes properly. If I pass number, let's say 5, factorial is going to be 1. Somewhere we have made the mistake. Can you point out where we have made the mistake? For 5 it is showing factorial as 1. This thing has to be n multiplied by factorial of n minus. This is the correct way. See, if I pass 5, it gives me factorial as 1. So the logic is now correct. So this is a typical recursive program to find out what is the factorial of a given number. If you remember it correctly from the C, is just a code conversion to the Python. It's nothing new anything about it. The next program that we'll take up is calculation of the GCD by Euclidean. If you remember, we have done it by using the loops in the previous class. Now what you do is try to write down the same logic or try to convert that iterative logic to the recursive logic. It's fine even if you just write the recursive function. Take 1 minute, take the paper and pen and try to write the logic. And when I will write, you just verify. And meanwhile, if you have any doubt for this, you can also ask. Just observe if I do it correctly. Let me call this as my GCD helper. The first thing that we did was taking care of the fact that the two numbers whose GCD I'm going to calculate has to be the first number greater than the second number. So first I will handle the case in case that the first number is lesser than or lower than the second number. So I will write down a case where m is less than n. If that is the case, what I can do is I can first swap those numbers and then again call this GCD helper with the actual arguments. Or what I can do is I can just do it well equal to my call to the same function, and in place of m and n what I will pass is n comma m. Even this will do it our work. If I just call the same function but with the reversed order. So whatever was the value of n will now be copied to m, and whatever is the value of m will now be copied to n. So I have handled the case where first number could be lesser than the second. The next thing that I'm supposed to do is elif, and I will have to write down a condition m modulo n is equal to 0. If this is the case, that means we have reached down to your base case where m modulo n becomes 0. Okay. So in that case, my ritual must be n, okay, because in that case n will be the GCD. Or else, if this is also not the case, then I will write that my ritual must be the call, the recursive call, but with the arguments as. So in place of m, what should come is n. In place of n, what should come is m modulo n. And at the end, I will have to return ritual. So this is the function, and you can similarly modify the complete driver code. Just take two numbers, pass them to your GCD helper and get back the result. So if you observe this function typically, it is somewhat easier than writing the iterative version of this GCD calculation. So in the exams, let's say if you find out that this kind of a solution or a recursive solution clicks to your mind at the first time, you can go with it. So this is just for the safety in case if you don't if you cannot think of a iterative logic at that time in the exams, then you can just write down the recursive logic. So this way is doing also is completely fine. Is there any doubt for this thing? If there are any doubts, then you can just ask online, or you can leave your doubt in the chat box. Okay, so if there are no doubts, the next example that we'll take up is from the assignment question question number 8. If you have the assignment, you can open, or I will share it here. So this question 8, many of you have also solved it, but most of you have used the iterative method. I will show you how to do the same program by using a recursion. So again, we will take a break of 2 minutes so that you can think of a logic and try to jot it down on the paper. And then we will verify. I hope that the problem statement must be quite clear. This collapse sequence is a very famous kind of a thing where you just take one number n, and depending upon whether it is odd or even, just keep on calculating the next number till you reach 1 in that sequence. If you read the example, if I let's say start from 6, now 6 being the even thing, what I will do is I will divide that number by 2. So the next number I get is 3. Now 3 being the odd number, what I will do is I will calculate the next number as 3n plus 1. So the next number I found is the 10. Now 10 is again even, so divided it by 2. you will get 5. 5 is odd, so make it 3n plus 1, you will get 16. 16 is even, then you are divided by 2. So I will get the next number as 8. It is even, again divided by 2. So once you reach in the sequence, or let's say in the pattern of 2 to the power k, then you will start degrading your pattern to 1. And it is a very sure thing that no matter what number you take, you will always reach down to 1. Now just try to write down the recursive logic for this, or you can just write down the mathematical definition on paper. Remember that you have to also print it. Okay, rule number 72 has said it's the correct solution. I'll just make one change into it. So let's say if this is your Collatz function, take one parameter as n, let's write down all the conditions. So in the beginning itself, since you have to print the complete series, what you can do is in the beginning itself you can just print whatever is the value of n, and then depending upon the conditions, then you can carry on your recursive calls. First, let's say we will write down a base condition. The base condition here is when your n is 1. Giving brackets here is again not mandatory. You can keep the uniformity as you like. So if n is 1, my req must be 1. And if the condition is if it is n, if n is, let's say, even, what I must do is I will call it this as a recursive call. Then I will pass number divided by 2, else the last case, if n is not 1, if n is not even, then it is definitely odd, and in that case I can write it well as collates pass the number as 3n plus 1 int. I will just done it well. If let's say your answer is return to 1, then you can assume that this collate sequence was basically successful. Okay. But there may be some cases where collates may fail. Those cases are, let's say, if you send a 0. So if n is sent to be 0 over here, let's say num is 0, and in the collates function if you send 0, what will happen in that case? None of the condition will be satisfied, right? Or whether n modulo 2 equal to 0 will be satisfied. So you think of what will happen, let's say if I pass n as 0, or let's say if someone passes a negative number to the sequence, then what will happen? Whether the recursion will fall into the infinite recursive calls or whether it will stop some. That I leave it up to you to polish these programs in the way that I've told you. The next example that we'll see is for the list. Okay. And that is basically, we have already seen the program, but what we'll do is the little bit modification to it. So the program is, if you remember, we have tried to print the factors of a number. So what you have to do is, in the last program that we covered, uh, the last class basically, we just printed those factors. Now here what you have to do is, you have to also store those factors. Okay, or you may say that I will first calculate all the factors and then at the end I will print it. If I give some number, just try to print all the factors uh, by first storing it in some array, and then at the end you just print that array. Also use a user defined function for this. I will just give you one hint. You have to make use of something that I told you as a concatenation. Concatenation of a number will be used here. If you are so sure, you can also send your program in the chat box. 72 has sent the solution. It's almost correct. The only thing that I'm not sure about is the fact j equal to I that you have. I'm really not sure whether the concatenation will happen that. Rest of the program is correct. So see the logic that I will try to write. So if this is my function factors helper n, so I will first pick up this f list as the list and mention that it is empty. So I'm basically denoting here is that the f list is empty, or you can assume it to be like you used to notify the empty set by writing it as something set equal to 5. F list is basically a list which is right now empty. Then I take a for loop, call it loop index as a y for I range, and let's say if I take it 1, then n plus 1, n plus 1, because if I just write n, that will move till just n minus 1. So it is obvious to write n plus 1. This is the loop that I have taken, and here I will write the condition if uh, I. So that means if I divides n, what I will write is my f list. The new f list will be concatenated with I. I is the number that will be concatenated to the F list. So whatever the elements are there in the F list, I will concatenate the value I to that currently existing F list. And once this is done, here I can just send back the F list. Unlike in the C where you cannot return back arrays unless you specifically write the return type as int star, here you can just return the complete list without bothering about what exactly will be the return. F list I have made initially this was empty. After I have written a loop for I in range 1 to n plus 1. I have not started it basically from 0, okay, because if I start from 0, here it will create a problem and it will try to divide some number n by 0. So divide by 0 error will occur if you start your loop from 0 only. Okay. Or what you can do is if you start from 0, here you will have to write down I plus 1, okay, so that the division will start from the one step ahead, which is from 1. So if that number completely divides that number will be added to the current list as the F list. So it will start from 1. 1 will of course divide any number. The first element will be 1. Then at the next, let's say if 2 also divides n, then the next element that will be concatenated to your F list is 2. Okay. So at this step your list will be 1 comma 2. Okay. Then you again let's say take the next iteration as 3. Okay, so if let's say 3 also divides n completely, so f list, the currently f list will be concatenated with the number 3. So at this point my new list will have elements as 1 comma 2 comma 3. Okay, and at the end once this loop is over, I can return back this f. This will be here. Please make sure that the indentations are taken care of. It is return f list is part of this definition. If you shift it over here, this will form the part of this for loop. And here again you can just take some number, put here you can take factors list, but to call this as number, pass the number and at the end without using a loop you can just print this factors list. Let's please make sure that you are giving a proper colons. I give some number. So the factors for 120 are 1, 2, 3, 4. Check if all the factors are mentioned here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until 120. So this is the complete list of the factors of 120. You try to again run. The factors are turned out to be 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50. So how this happens is, firstly, when I give 50 at this point, so this is called with n as 50. The F list is created, which is initially empty. Then this for loop is iterated from 1 to 50, and every number is checked whether that divides n. Whenever it divides that number, that number is concatenated to this initial empty list, and this list keeps on growing, such as case of 50. First 1 is getting stored, then at the I equal to 2, 2 also divides 50, so the new list will be 1 comma 2. For the next 3, 3 is not going to divide 50, so it is eliminated. 4 is also not going to divide 50. Then we consider 5, 5 divides 50, so it is concatenated to the already existing list of 1 comma 2, and so 1 comma 2 plus 5 is basically done over there. The new list is formed to be 1 comma 2 comma 5. And this goes on till 50. So this is a, a very small use of arrays that you may require in your program. So this marks the end of the complete Python thing. I should stop sharing and just tell you some important points, and then we will call it off for today. So as I said, you won't be asked any direct questions over recursion and arrays, okay, but it may happen while solving some program. You may find that using arrays or using recursion might give you an easier solution, or it may strike at your mind at the first hand. So you can use any recursion arrays in your programs, that there is no foundation, but we will not typically ask any direct question on recursion or the arrays. And any question that will be asked to you can be easily solved with just loops. If you find that rather than writing the loops, this solution can be easily written by using, let's say, recursion, you can just freely use it. And now I just leave it up to your curiosity to explore this language if that really fascinates you. Like, I personally feel that Python is way more interesting than the C language, and it is somewhat less complicated than the C language. So I have already told what books you should refer if you want to go on exploring further. As far as the syllabus is concerned, it is already till the loops only. Okay. And in the loops, basically, I actually forgot one, two, three things to mention in the last class, and that was about regarding the range function. So let me open this my file and share. All of you, please stay back for 2 more minutes. I hope this document is visible to you. So in the range function, I actually forgot to add these two things. Okay. When I have told you this range function, where you have to mention the lower limit as well as the upper limit, okay, and the sequence is generated from the lower limit till the upper limit minus 1 in the steps of 1. Okay. If you want that sequence to be generated in the steps of, let's say, k, then you have to mention the third parameter as k, like this. Okay. So if you write range I comma j comma k, so the your sequence of loop will start from the I value. It will go on incrementing by k. So if you start from I, the next value of your loop index will be I plus k, then I plus 2k till I plus nk. Okay, so this k will be the steps in which, if you want, let's say, by increment the increment operator by let's say I equal to I plus 2. Okay, so you can write here as 2. Okay, so this incrementation will be done in the steps of 2. Okay. If you mention in place of this third argument, let's say -1, okay, and if your I value is greater than j, then this will be the downward loop, okay, or the reverse loop you can see. So it will start from I, okay, and then it will go on from I to I minus 1, I minus 2, I minus 3, likewise till j plus 1. Remember that this, if you just write j, it will go on till j plus 1. If you write this loop to go downwards till only j, you will have to write down j minus 1 at this point. If I write minus 2 in place of this thing, my loop will start from I, then the next loop index will be I minus 2, then it will be I minus 4, I minus 6 till this point. So if you want the downward loop, you can write this range function as the, the lower limit, the upper limit, and the increment that you want. Okay, as the third parameter. This is the additional thing that I forgot to mention and add it. This will be updated on the website, so I request all of you to just re-download this document. So now what we'll do is, as I said, we will take up the questions or doubts, whatever you want. If you have any doubts regarding the previous things that we have covered, you can ask it over. And before you ask the doubts, let me tell you that what I'm planning is to start the structures in C from the uh, next or next to next week, and probably we'll have to cover the complete syllabus as uh, in the online mode itself, okay, because we may not get the time to meet in the college and cover it during the classes. And also, I will request you to solve all the assignments and send them as early as possible to you, because we are getting the hints from the department that the assignments will have basically more weightage than the exams, because they are considering the option of some taking some online exams or whatsoever they finalize. But please genuinely solve the assignments and send them, because if the notification comes out that you have to give more weightage on assignments, then it should not make a burden on you. So since you have a very much of the free time now, so apart from the Netflix, you can also try to solve the assignments and just try to send them as early as possible. The assignment is given for the Python, it's of a moderate level, so you can easily solve. So now if there are any doubts regarding the today's class or any previous class, we can take. Otherwise, we'll call it off for today.